Hello, you lovely lot, and welcome back to the number one show if you like the 80s explained to you in a very sequential way. I completed 80s music, very niche subsection there. I'm the 80s mixtaper, your host for this mammoth journey through the biggest, brightest and most bonkers songs of this incredible decade in music. Today, we complete a relatively short stay through July 1982 through the start of Playlist 45. And what an episode we have, featuring the Stranglers, Kid Creole, Madness, the McRarys, the Boys Town Gang, Blancmange and Survivor. But before we get into the music proper, I just wanted to highlight a really lovely reaction I got from someone on social media. It was one of those moments that makes doing this relatively niche pod absolutely worth it. So earlier last week, I posted the duet Endless Love between Lionel Richie and Diana Ross on TikTok from episode 29. And a woman responded called AJ Love My Kids. And she said, "Me and my husband's wedding song and will be our funeral song. Go watch the film. It's beautiful but sad too." I mean, how beautiful and moving is it? And thank you for sharing such an intimate moment that you and your husband have this single that will ultimately bookend your love and your time together. The room just got a little dusty, you know? Yeah, that's something special. If you want to find me on your socials, I'm across Instagram, Threads, TikTok and YouTube as the 80s Mixtaper. Or if you're old school like me and want to email some memories to the show, you can email me at completed80s@aol.com. That's completed80s@aol.com. Also, for any new listeners, unfortunately we can't play the songs on the pod due to copyright laws, but you will find the playlist in the episode description, including a full track listing as well. So let's dive now into the mid-July 1982 and Playlist 45. We start today with a bunch of leather-clad, aggressive misanthropes who somehow had just demonstrated that they were capable of writing songs as elegant as the masters. In episode 35, the Stranglers had just achieved an accidental masterpiece. In early 1982, their label Liberty Records, an imprint absorbed into EMI, reluctantly released Golden Brown, a baroque harpsichord waltz about heroin and a Mediterranean girl, completely at odds to their back catalogue. The label initially hated the track and doubted its commercial potential, but the public disagreed, propelling it all the way to number 2 on the UK singles chart. Naturally, the label wanted more of that lucrative formula. The band, however, chose the album's title track, La Folie, as the follow-up single in April 1982. It was an eerie track delivered entirely in French by bassist Jean-Jacques Bonnel about a real-life Parisian murder case. Unsurprisingly, it failed to capture the same mainstream magic, peaking lower down the charts at number 47. With the relationship between the musicians and the record executives at a new low, the band sought to break free. After a period of intense legal wrangling, a severance deal was struck, allowing the Stranglers to formally exit their contract and sign a new deal with CBS Epic Records. To walk away cleanly, they were contractually obligated to provide EMI with a final greatest hits compilation. The collection, 1977 to 1982, and one last studio single. And what did they give them? This is Strange Little Girl. Track 1, Playlist 45. Strange Little Girl successfully peaked at number 7 in the UK chart in August 1982. The sleight of hand genius of this track is rooted entirely in petty, beautifully executed artistic revenge. When forced to hand over a final song to EMI, frontman Hugh Cornwall dug into the archives and unearthed a track written way back in 1974. It had been co-written by Cornwell and the band's original Swedish keyboardist Hans Wormling, long before Dave Greenfield ever joined the group. In 1975, the struggling unsigned band had sent a demo containing this exact song to EMI. EMI had promptly sent it back with a rejection slip. 7 years later, the band re-recorded the track. Dave Greenfield laid down a swirling synthesizer arrangement that followed Warmling's original piano foundation, and Hugh Cornwell added the guitar. They handed it over as their parting gift. EMI accepted it greedingly to capitalise on the momentum of Golden Brown, entirely oblivious to the fact that they were heavily promoting a song they had deemed garbage nearly a decade prior. Lyrically, while the song paints a picture of a girl losing her innocence in a rough town, Hugh Cornwell explained that the narrative was inspired by a real girl in Bramley. She owned horses and would hitchhike every day from the town out to the country just to feed them. Cornwell combined this local imagery with the nods to the 18th century French author Alain René Lesage, whose social realism novel Gil Blas inspired the track's thematic tone. The single's visual presentation carried on the band's aesthetic. The iconic single cover features a photograph of drummer Jet Black's young daughter Charlotte. Meanwhile, the music video was filmed as a dreamlike noir-tinged journey through London's Liverpool Street and Cambridge Circus, featuring the band surrounded by a crowd of genuine female punk fans. The single successfully served its purpose as a parting shot. It secured the band a top 10 hit, satisfied the bureaucrats at EMI, and allowed the Stranglers to step smoothly into their next era at Epic Records. Years later, in 2001, the song's haunting melody caught the ear of Tori Amos, who recorded a prominent cover version for her concept album, appropriately titled Strange Little Girls. For track 2, we have a man and a band holding the middle of the rope in a glittering synthesised tug of war. On one side you have the brooding synth-pop architects, on the other the new romantics in heavy eyeliner. Then, swaggering out of New York City comes a man wearing a cascading, wide-lapelled zoot suit, flanked by a trio of fiercely synchronised backing singers. We last crossed paths with Kid Creole and the Coconuts earlier this year when they subverted the dance floor with the tongue-in-cheek narcissism of I'm a Wonderful Thing Baby, episode 41. That single proved the group was more than a New York underground novelty, it was a bona fide UK pop phenomenon. The mastermind behind the curtain is singer-songwriter August Darnell, born Thomas Broder. Darnell is a former English teacher from Alverta B. Gray Schultz Middle School who designed Kid Creole as an escape, a theatrical big band caricature combining big ego, big brass and intricate storylines. But the pressure is mounting. Their label ZE Records is facing severe financial strain. Darnell originally conceptualises his next batch of songs as a solo project titled Wise Guy. However, the label intervenes, pushing him to release it under the full Kid Creole banner and to make it more commercial sounding to relieve the company's financial problems. This brings us to the second single from that brilliant May 1982 album, released as Tropical Gangsters in the UK and as Wise Guy in the US. It's a track built on a massive funky bass line laced with classic Hollywood cinema tropes. This is Stool Pigeon, track 2 today. Stool Pigeon was released as a UK single in July 1982, and it became an instant smash, climbing all the way to number 7 on the UK singles chart and hitting number 25 on the US club play chart. The narrative backbone of the song is like a film noir. The lyrics tell the story of an old ex-con who returns to the street where no one's safe. He encounters the FBI, cuts a deal to squeal, and receives a credit card, a Thunderbird, a spanking new identity, and a condo down in Miami in return. To package a dark story about a mob informant into a vibrant high-energy dance track is a uniquely August Darnell move. The artistic inspiration traces directly back to Darnell's love of mid-century cinema. During an appearance on BBC Breakfast, Darnell explained that he was a great fan of the 1940s dress style, specifically the double-breasted pinstripe suits and hats worn by movie gangsters. His heroes had been Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable, Edward G. Robinson. Stool Pigeon was written as a direct musical and stylistic tribute to that entire cinematic genre. Musically, the track relies on a brilliant propulsive blend of funk and Latin pop elements, recorded during the sessions that span from Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas to the engineering rooms of New York. It features a funky chorus where the lyrical rhythm almost drives the track in a sort of a street dance style. The most iconic element of the song, however, is the completely improvised nonsensical vocal hook, ha-cha-cha-cha. Darnell would later note in interviews with UK media like The Guardian that the song transformed him into a massive star in Europe, prompting fans to sing his own lyrics back at him at airports. Decades later, Stool, Pigeon remains a milestone of early 80s genre blending, proving that complex cinematic lyricism could comfortably sit on top of an uncompromising club groove. Darnell even named his career-spanning lyric book Call Me Mr. Lyrical after realising online lyric sites frequently transcribe the words to Stool Pigeon completely wrong. We now return to the story of the Nutty Boys for the 12th time. You already know how much I love Madness, and I've almost been annoyed I've not been able to give them a Best Band award for either 1980 or 81, and I doubt I'll be able to for 82 either due to Duran Duran and Culture Club amongst others. But you can't ignore 12 hits already. No one has gotten close. So let's call it now. They win the award for longevity. Best consistent band, perhaps. Back in May 1982, Camden's finest had finally conquered the mountain. After years of falling just short, House of Fun handed Madness their very first UK #1 single. It was a massive moment of pop validation, a teenage rite of passage anthem about buying condoms that tickled the funny bone of the nation's sense of humour. So what do you do when you've just achieved the ultimate chart peak? If you're Madness, you immediately turn around and record a song about a completely ordinary, slightly unreliable economy car. This is I Like Driving in My Car, track 3. In the 80s, everyone knew this song. It was fun, it was silly, the lyrics were easy. My dad was not the most musical of men, but even he would be singing a few lines of this song when firing up the Vauxhall Cavalier. Released as a standalone single on the 16th of July 1982, this next track completely avoided their usual studio album cycle. It was a fast, eccentric and wonderfully literal detour that kept their incredible top 10 streak alive. While it sounds like a straightforward piece of classic nutty sound, music hall novelty, the reality behind this track is a fascinating mix of industrial logistics, technical firsts, but also a band also quietly showing early signs of fatigue. The song was written entirely by the band's keyboardist and musical engine room Mike Barson. However, a minor clarification of the inspiration. While Barson did own an old ex-GPO van, the track's lyrics are an explicit love letter to the Morris Minor, a classic British economy car produced between 1948 and 1972, which famously became the country's first vehicle to hit 1 million sales. When you look closely at the lyrics, the geography is also surprisingly specific. Suggs sings about driving up to Primrose Hill and heading down to Selseybill. Musically, the song holds a highly unique place in history that often gets overlooked. The writer Colin Larkin contends that Driving in My Car was incredibly novel for its early deployment of sampling technology. The production team of Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley used a Fairlight CMI synthesizer to capture actual automobile sound effects, including a revving engine and a honking horn, and seamlessly turned them into percussion and musical instruments. Fairlight programmer Richard James Burgess even recalled the grueling session trying to sample a van door slam in the car park under Air Studios. Outside of underground hip-hop, almost nobody in mainstream British pop was exploring sampling quite like this in the summer of 1982. Of course, you cannot talk about Madness without mentioning the video. Directed by Dave Robinson, it stands up as an all-time classic piece of Madness slapstick. It starts with the band dressed up as mechanics messing about in a Shepherd's Bush garage before they hit the streets in the Maddie-mobile, a white 1959 Morris Minor sporting a customised Mad 7 number plate. There is also a brilliant cameo from their two-tone contemporaries, Funboy 3. Look closely and you'll see them trying to hitchhike to Coventry in the second half of the song. And later, Suggs sings that he drove along the A45, the actual trunk road linking from Birmingham and Coventry. If you picked up the 12-inch version, you also got Riding on My Bike, a comical alternative version sung by saxophonist Lee Thompson. The record buyers, the general public even, absolutely loved it. It entered the charts on the 24th of July 1982 and spent 8 weeks on the UK singles chart, ultimately peaking at number 4. It even crossed oceans, climbing all the way to number 20 on the Australian charts. Remarkably, it was the 13th entry in a legendary run of 20 consecutive UK top 20 hits for the band. Yet, as always seems to be the case in the 80s, underneath the fun, the engine was starting to overheat. Barson was growing exhausted by the non-stop pressure of the group's public profile, a strain that would eventually see him leave the band a couple of years later. But for 8 weeks in 1982, the Maddie-mobile was running smoothly. Next up, something a little different. A little bit of gospel and soul, which failed to crack the top 40, but I think is an absolutely gorgeous single. There's a specific kind of late-night R&B record that feels less like a song and more like an atmospheric condition. It's the music of open car windows, dashboard lights, humid air, and the brief elusive magic of a warm evening when everything seems entirely possible. Like a late May sunset where the swifts are screeching overhead, ready to settle in for the night. You can hear it in the slick synth bass, the crisp guitar chops and the effortless vocal harmonies that bridge the gap between Sunday morning church pews and Saturday night dance floors. Today we're focusing on a delightful forgotten gem. It's a song that did not top the Billboard charts or the UK charts, but remains an essential, deeply treasured classic for record collectors, soul purists, and anyone who appreciates the sublime blend of disco, funk, and gospel-infused R&B. Let's meet the McRarys with their song Love on a Summer Night. This is track 4, playlist 45. The McRarys were not a manufactured studio creation. They were a tightly knit family act. Originally from Youngstown, Ohio, the group consisted of siblings Linda, Alfred, Charity, Sam and Howard McRary. Like many of the greatest soul and R&B outfits in American history, their foundation was built entirely on gospel music. In 1972, the quintet made their official recording debut by releasing the gospel album titled Sunshine Day on Light Records. Shortly after their debut, the family relocated from Ohio to Los Angeles, California. In 1973, they made a pivotal creative shift towards secular and progressive soul music, releasing their self-titled sophomore album Emerge on the small Beverly Hills-based label Cat's Eye Records. The tracking on Emerge featured a blend of social consciousness, jazzy R&B and grit, spanning original McRary tunes like Kung Fu and Be a Father to Your Song, alongside a cover of Carole King's You've Got a Friend. Following this release, Howard McRary briefly stepped away from the core secular lineup to focus heavily on solo gospel goals, though he would periodically return to collaborate on the group's later recordings. The remaining siblings quickly became highly sought-after vocal talents in the West Coast studio scene, eventually appearing as a collective backing unit on Cat Stevens' 1978 track New York Times from his album Back to Earth. The group's major commercial breakthrough occurred in 1978 after signing with Portrait Records, an imprint of CBS. They released the album Loving is Living, which was launched with high-profile advocacy from none other than Stevie Wonder. Wonder was so impressed by the family that he contributed a signature harmonica solo to their track You. He even wrote glowing liner notes for the album sleeve, stating, "If it is your desire to experience lyrics of sincerity, song and harmony, family and unity, your heart being warmed by universal and intimate loves, then share with me the fulfillment of that desire by experiencing the McRary family." The single You, written by Alfred, Linda and Sam McRary, became a massive R&B hit and crossed over heavily into pop radio, peaking just shy of the Billboard Hot 100 Top 40. This momentum earned them high-profile performance slots, allowing them to tour with mainstream heavyweights like the Jacksons, the OJs and Gladys Knight. They followed up their Portrait debut with the albums On the Other Side in 1979 and Just For You in 1980. By 1982, the group signed with Capitol Records and reunited with Howard McRary in the studio. They teamed up with acclaimed jazz fusion trombonist and producer Wayne Henderson, a founding member of the Crusaders. Henderson produced their 1982 album All Night Music. Unlike the other tracks on the album written by the McRary siblings, Henderson teamed up with songwriter Elaine Runner to pen the album's standout track, Love on a Summer Night. The lyrics paint an evocative picture of seasonal romance. Love on a summer night, a gentle breeze on a starry night, the feeling's there, music everywhere, love is in the air. The production leans heavily on snappy percussion, syncopated guitar rhythms, and warm analog synthesizers, creating an infectious, uplifting groove. At the centre of the track are the magnificent lead vocals from the sisters, treading lines with a classic gospel-influenced structure that injects the secular dance track with a sense of pure, transcendent joy. While the album All Night Music did not meet Capitol Records' initial commercial sales expectations, leading to the group being dropped by the label, the track has become a bit of a collector's item. Over the decades, it has experienced a massive resurgence among underground house DJs, electronic producers, and rare groove collectors. Songs like Desire by 18 Karat Affair have sampled its distinct groove. And all this from a family group that brought the sacred precision of gospel harmony into the secular world of funk and soul. Next up on our monumental trek through the 1980s UK charts, we start to head into late summer and August 1982. We are pulling up a bar stool in the Castro district of San Francisco to introduce a studio project that turned a 1960s Frankie Valli classic into a defining anthem of the global gay club scene. This group was designed from its very conception to cater specifically to a gay clientele, arriving exactly when disco was transitioning into the electronic pulse of High NRG. This track would eventually scale the UK charts all the way to number 4. Let's drop the needle on Can't Take My Eyes Off of You by the Boys Town Gang. This is track 5. Let's start by tracing the story back to 1980 and meet San Francisco DJ and producer Bill Motley. As we know by now, by 1980 the mainstream American music industry had aggressively declared disco is dead. But Motley knew better. In San Francisco's thriving gay nightlife, centred around hotspots like the Soma district and the Castro, communal dancing wasn't a passing fad. It was an essential tool for liberation, visibility and joy. Motley saw an open market for upbeat tracks tailored directly for these dance floors. Alongside co-founder Victor Swedish, who owned a gay bar called the Moby Dick Bar, Motley established Moby Dick Records to pioneer what would be dubbed the Moby Dick sound. Motley auditioned hundreds of singers before selecting local cabaret vocalist Cynthia Manley to lead the studio project. To provide harmonious support, he also recruited backing singers Robin Charin, Don Wood, Phil Manganello, Tom Morley and Keith Stewart. The original plan was modest, a single 12-inch record. The A-side was a high-energy medley of Ashford and Simpson's Remember Me and Ain't No Mountain High Enough. The B-side, however, was pure audio verite, an explicit 4-act disco drama titled Cruisin' the Streets, which explicitly documented a snapshot of Ringgold Alley, a notorious cruising spot in San Francisco's South of Market district. The record exploded on the club charts, solidifying the group's role in the burgeoning global gay scene. However, Manley departed shortly after the first LP to pursue solo work. For the group's second album, Disc Charge, Motley shook up the project by installing Jackson Moore on lead vocals. This brings us to the centrepiece of that 1981 recorded 1982 peaking album, their cover of Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. The track completely bypassed the American mainstream radar, but went absolutely nuclear across Europe. It hit number 1 in the Netherlands, Belgium and Spain and peaked at number 4 on the UK singles chart in October 1982. Musically, It's a masterclass in high NRG production. Motley took the organic horn arrangements and emotional core of the 1967 pop original and layered them over a relentless synthetic high BPM electronic bass line. The accompanying promotional appearances featured Moore, flanked by tight athletic male dancers executing camp, highly synchronised choreography, bringing an unapologetic slice of San Francisco club culture directly onto televisions worldwide. It was joyful, it was loud, and it refused to hide in the shadows. The Boys Town Gang would achieve a few more minor UK chart entries with high energy covers of Signed, Sealed, Delivered and Come and Get Your Love, but Can't Take My Eyes Off You remains their moment of genius. Tragically, the vibrant scene that birthed them was soon to be devastated, with Moby Dick Records closing down after the local community was hit catastrophically by the AIDS epidemic. Yet, this track stands as a glittering monument to a moment of pure, unadulterated musical liberation. For track 6, was this next band the British answer to America's Talking Heads or something completely different? The UK charts are now awash with the second wave of Synth Britannia. You have the sharp tailoring of ABC, the moody romanticism of OMD, and the pop perfection of Depeche Mode. Enter a band named after a jiggly, sugary French dessert. Mute Records founder Daniel Miller once affectionately dubbed them the maiden aunts of electronic music. But when you dropped the needle on their newish 7-inch vinyl, you didn't get Tea Party music. You got a lurching, belligerent, percussive monster. This is Blancmange with Feel Me. This is track 6. Blancmange was formed in Harrow, London in 1979. The core architecture of the band consisted of singer and lyricist Neil Arthur, born in Darwen, Lancashire, and multi-instrumentalist Stephen Luscombe, hailing from Hillingdon, Middlesex. A third member, Lawrence Stevens, was briefly involved at the very inception but departed before the band truly gained momentum. Arthur and Luscombe met at Harrow College. They shared a fierce DIY punk ethos, a mutual love for craft work, and a complete lack of formal music boundaries. Luscombe had spent time in the infamous Portsmouth Symphonia, an avant-garde orchestra where members explicitly played instruments they were not trained in. Arthur proudly viewed their own lack of technical training as an asset. In their early art school days, they dragged household appliances, kitchen utensils, and a borrowed Sony cassette machine into a room to craft loops of raw experimental noise. Their first official output was a self-released 7-inch EP in 1980 titled Irene and Mavis. It was filled with 6 tracks of surreal, abstract noise that barely hinted at the charts. However, they caught the attention of futurist DJ Steve-O. He selected their instrumental track Sad Day for his era-defining Some Bizarre album compilation in early 1981. Placed alongside unsigned peers like Soft Cell, Depeche Mode and the Blancmange suddenly had a spotlight. That compilation intrigued London Records, who swiftly signed the duo to a major deal. When they entered the studio with producer Mike Howlett to record their debut album Happy Families, the experimental tape loop project transformed into an aggressive rhythm section. The creation of Feel Me was a true division of labour. As Neil Arthur recalled in a retrospective interview, Stephen came in with a groove. My input was the words and the top-line melody. That groove was heavily steeped in dance pop and fractured funk. It was precisely here that the music world began drawing immediate parallels to Talking Heads. Music critics of both the era and subsequent retrospectives consistently point to New York's art funk pioneers when breaking down Feel Me. In an archival review preserved on the Trouser Press Blancmange Guide, the publication noted that the more aggressive tracks on Happy Families were loud, rhythmic, and derivative of Talking Heads, explicitly calling out Feel Me for its urgent drive. The similarities lie heavily in 2 components, the rhythm and the vocal delivery. Feel Me trades standard sterile synth plodding for a nervous, syncopated electro-funk line. Analysts from the Electricity Club retrospective observed that the track actively fused the rhythmic dash of Talking Heads with the stark electronic intensity of early post-punk. Neil Arthur's vocal performance on the track is remarkably distinct. Rather than using a detached, icy new wave drone, he shifts between a stiff croon and sudden bursts of frantic emotion. This dramatic vocal approach was widely compared by contemporary UK print journals to David Byrne's frantic delivery, highlighting how Arthur's distinct Northern English inflections gave the talking head style a highly localised, eccentric twist. Despite its incredible danceability and popularity in clubs, Feel Me was only a modest commercial success upon its initial release. It peaked at number 46 on the UK singles chart, spending 5 weeks on the chart in the late summer of 1982. It didn't quite crack the mainstream open for them. That honour would belong to their next single, Living on the Ceiling, which soared into the UK top 10 later that year, which we'll definitely hear soon. Critical deep dives, such as those found on the Pop Matters Music Archive, praised the track's inclusion on Happy Families as an essential moment of inventive electro-funk. This was a time when two art school kids could take kitchen utensils, a love for German electronic music, an obsession with New York funk, and turn it into a charting British synth single. We finish today with a cinematic flourish. Well, less of a flourish and more of an uppercut to the chin. Today we are unlocking one of two encounters with a band that epitomises the sweat, the leather and the unyielding optimism of the era. Up next is the absolute heavyweight champion of motivational anthems. Clubber Lang, Thunder Lips, Apollo Creed and of course Rocky Balboa. It must be the theme to Rocky 3. This is Eye of the Tiger from Survivor. Track 7, our final song today. Let's all don our grey sweatpants, run up the steps in Philadelphia and look at how this iconic punch synthesized riff came to dominate global airwaves. Survivor was formed in Chicago in 1978 by keyboardist Jim Petterick and guitarist Frankie Sullivan. Petterick was no stranger to the industry. He'd previously fronted the Ides of March, scoring a massive US number 2 hit back in 1970 with a horn-heavy track, Vehicle. However, by the late 70s he wanted a pure commercial AOR rock engine. He teamed up with Sullivan, recruited the beret-wearing powerhouse vocalist Dave Bickler, and set to work. Their 1979 self-titled debut album barely caused a ripple, and their 1981 follow-up, Premonition, only yielded minor traction with the single Poor Man's Son. They were talented, but they were firmly stuck in the undercard of the music industry. They were running out of money, and Frankie Sullivan was literally playing a guitar with a broken headstock that he had to glue back together. Meanwhile, over in Hollywood, Sylvester Stallone was deep in post-production for Rocky 3. He wanted a contemporary aggressive sound to replace the traditional Bill Conti orchestral horns. Stallone actually edited the initial cut of the film using Queen's 1980 smash Another One Bites the Dust. He desperately wanted to keep it, but Queen denied him the publishing rights. Left without a theme, Stallone's friend Tony Scotti, who co-runs Survivor's record label Scotti Brothers, played him some tracks from Premonition. Stallone loved the street-level grit of the band. He left a series of messages on the answer machines of Jim Petterick and Frankie Sullivan. Stallone sent the musicians a rough cut of the movie. Petterick and Sullivan realised the music needed to match the physical pacing of the film. They deliberately structured that staccato-driving guitar riff to mimic the exact rhythm of a boxer landing punches. Interestingly, the track was almost called Survival. The original chorus featured lines designed to rhyme perfectly with that word. However, as they watched the footage, they heard the dialogue where Apollo Creed tells Rocky he needs to get back the eye of the tiger. Realising that phrase was an undeniable hook, they abandoned the perfect rhymes and rewrote the chorus around Stallone's dialogue. They cut a rough demo at the Chicago Recording Company on February the 1st, 1982. They intentionally tried to replicate the booming heavy drum sound of Led Zeppelin's John Bonham. Stallone was so enamoured with the raw energy of this demo that he edited it straight into the movie. If you listen closely to the version in Rocky 3, it actually features actual tiger growls that were removed from the polished album version. Rocky III hit theatres on May the 28th, 1982 and was an absolute box office juggernaut, grossing $270 million worldwide. The single, released that same May, rode the cinematic wave all the way to the top. It spent 6 glorious weeks at number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and topped the UK singles chart for 5 weeks. It secured the band a Grammy Award for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with vocal and an Academy Award nomination. Sylvester Stallone needed a track to prove Rocky Balboa wasn't a total chump, and in the process he saved Survivor from having to hawk their instruments at a Chicago pawn shop. Ultimately, this song did exactly what Clubber Lang couldn't do for Rocky in the first 3 rounds. It absolutely refused to go down. So that's all she wrote on the first half of Playlist 45, but coming next week we slide into late summer 1982 and August, and this is a phenomenal second half. This is one of my favourite weeks we've had in quite a while. We get the Psychedelic Furs dropping yet another cinematic classic. We meet the cannibal-eating Toto Coelho, I think that's how you say it. David Sylvian breaks from Japan. Rocker's Revenge set the blueprint for the future house music scene. We meet synth maestro Thomas Dolby, and we end with an absolute Carly Simon classic. This is one not to be missed. So until next week, have a wonderful week. Enjoy this incredible sunshine that we've got, and we'll see you again on I Completed 80s Music. Take care.